Okay, I'm back. Scotch tape, which can't get too far wrapping things without Scotch tape. Silly me. So I'm going to start on the ends. And at some point I'm going to have to take notches out of the corners in order to get into the thinner part. But I'm not going to worry about it quite yet because I'd like to get it creased so that I know where I'm going with it. And then I can cut into the corners. So I'm going to kind of notch it. I know that I need to go in 2 squares on my little grid. So this is what I've done. I've cut out 2 squares on the grid. Because when I folded it up, that's kind of where it landed. And that gets me to here. As you can see, it makes the corner a little nicer. And I'm going to fold in 1 grid. I don't want it to go too far down the edge of this inner piece. I want it to kind of sit like that. So that's where I'm going to tape it. Like so. Now, what you want to do is you want to turn it. You don't want to do the sides yet. You want to turn it so that you can push this tight, and this area is all nice and tight, and the top ends up all nice and tight. If you start doing the sides, it can move and jiggle around and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm making my crease, and then I'm going to unfold it, and I'm going to see where my crease is, and I'm going to notch out again. So you just kind of cut up to where your crease is, and obviously where the side of the box is. And you cut out the rectangle in the corner. I should mention this, if I'm totally out to lunch, it's now 1 o'clock in the morning. I get home from work usually at midnight, and I've been thinking all day about this tutorial. So I could have been a smart person and waited until morning when I was awake and organized and done all this. But that's not how I roll. I kind of have to get things done while I've got the urge, because I'm just weird that way. Alright, so again, up and over, and I'm creasing it so I know. I'm going to fold down 1 grid piece, and that's where I'm going to tape. So I'm just putting a piece on each side. I don't know how well you can see it from there, so I'll do this, a bit of a close-up, with my heart shape up. So that's where we are so far. And this is where it usually starts to get tricky. But the easiest way that I've found so far is to take these flat pieces, this piece here, fold it straight in, kind of like you're making hospital corners in the bed. So if you fold it straight in, now you can check and see if that's going to work. And no, it's not. See here? So you don't take it all the way across then. I'm going to do it. Excuse me. I'll play around a little bit until I figure out what the best way is to fold it to get that corner covered. And I think I found it. Alright. So I know I want it to go, there's a line here, I know I want it to go over there. So I'm going to crease it on that line, and then I'm just going to fold towards it. This will kind of tuck in by itself. See how nice and tight that corner is? It takes a little playing around sometimes to figure out the best way to get it to do what you want. Usually you can get it to do what you want sooner or later. So before I tape that, I'm going to do this side, because sometimes the paper will rip if you're trying to do one side and you've got one already taped down. So again, I'm finding the line that goes down from the corner of my box, and I'm going to crease it there, and then I'm simply going to fold it up and then check to make sure it's all tucked in tightly, which it is. Then, of course, like I did on the other side, I'm going to crease the edge, fold it back down, and I'm going to fold down the top bit. And then before we tape anything down, we're going to lay it and check it and see if it looks good. Okay, so just I need a little tucking to make sure there's no edge sticking out. And all in all, I think it's going to look pretty good. It's going to look like this, and the corners are nice and tidy. Turn it around to make it a little easier to hold it, and I'm going to start taping things. And it's longer, so I'm going to put one in the center. Excuse me again. And I'm going to put one in each corner. And then just to make sure it's all secure, I'm going to tape over the joint and down the side, like so. Just because I don't want to catch that corner on something and have it rip. So I need to put one here. And I'm going to go again over the crease or the joint and down the side. So, one side done. Fairly tidy looking, not too bad, and a little heart in the middle. So we're going to repeat it on this side. We're going to find the line that lines up at the corner of the box and crease it on both sides. And then we're going to fold it upwards. Make sure the sides are tucked in, the little bit underneath is tucked in. And kind of press it down with your fingers to set the crease in place. That way the next time you put it up, it just automatically falls into that position. And again, when we lay it flat on top, we're going to crease it. And then we're going to tuck the extra in. You could leave the extra there, but then you have to tuck it down into the corner. And that's usually a bigger pain than all this other stuff is. Corners are usually where everything goes wrong. So if you tuck the corner piece under, life ends up a little easier. This corner's giving me a hard time. Like I said, corners are not the easiest part. So, turn it around so I can kind of hang on to it easier. I don't usually make this much effort repurposing boxes. For some reason, these boxes just appeal to me because it's almost like a little, what do you call it? Shadow box, I guess is the term. It's almost like a little shadow box, and it just seemed extra fancy. Alright, so our corners are all nice and tidy. And we've got our wrapped base. And hopefully, if all goes well, or went well, I should be able to pin my brooch right to the heart. Okay, so that's the plan. This one because it's a little bit bigger, so it fills up the box a little bit nicer. And I'm just sliding that right into the felt. There we go. I think that worked out quite well. So now, onto the lid. Quick test. And we see the writing through the lid. The lid through the paper. No, again, it's pretty thick paper, so I think I'm safe. Going to take, I want to try and get it so the paper wraps up and over and all the way into the top here, just to make it nice and tidy. And that means I need 1, 2, 3, maybe 4.5 squares. So 4.5 squares, 4.5 squares from both sides. And that leaves me 1, 2, 3, 4.5 squares on that side, so I'm cutting down that long. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Every so often too, which is kind of cool about this paper, there's a darker line on the grid. I guess it's just meant to help you keep track of where you are, which in this instance is coming in very handy. So, there. Okay, get this big thing out of the way. Alright, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Puts us pretty much right there. Alright, so I think cutting out notches worked pretty well, so that's what I'm going to do this time as well. Sorry, out of the picture, I know. One of these days I'll figure out this whole best way to videotape. What I really need is someone to just, do all this whole editing technical stuff for me, because it's not my forte. Okay, so as you can see, it's bunching up a little bit because it's a little bit longer than I needed. And being as picky as I am, I'm just going to fold the top edge under. It really doesn't make that big of a difference, but it makes me feel better. So I have folded a little tiny bit. I'm going to go back to where I was, get my tape ready, hold down my box so it doesn't move on me, and then fold and tuck, and tape. I find taping into a corner is a little bit of a pain because it never sits level. So it's almost easier to tape the bottom piece down first, and then wherever it lands on your wrapping paper is where you end up with it. So there's the first side. If you can see that very well. So as I did last time, I'm going to turn it around towards me and repeat. And that way it stays nice and tight. It's kind of funny, the last couple of years I'm noticing the effect of my quirks and peculiarities on my children, because I put a lot of effort, like when they were little I put a lot of effort into wrapping things. Everything had color coordinated bows and frills and handmade labels and all sorts of, I thought that was wonderful. I put a lot of effort into it because I wanted it to be extra special for the kids. And you know what kids are like at Christmas. The first thing they did was grab it and rip everything off. They never looked at the label at all. They didn't even know who gave it to them, because it was a present and they wanted it open right that exact second. So there was paper and bows and ribbon flying. It took them half a second to get into something that took me 20 minutes to wrap. And it was a little heartbreaking. I'm not going to lie. It was heartbreaking, because I really thought that they were going to notice the effort that got put in. I don't know what I was thinking, or why I thought that. I was insane, obviously. I was a first-time parent, first kid. And anyways, so I thought they were going to notice all this extra effort and go, ooh, how pretty, before they ripped it. No, that did not happen. They just laid into it like it was Christmas morning. And so eventually I got a little bit more laid back about the whole effort that I put into wrapping things. Until they got a little older. When they got a little older and they could notice, I went back to it. But by then, I realized that I had one child. We all have one child, I think. Cannot stand surprises or secrets. She could not stand not to know what was in those gifts. Which was funny because that's exactly what my sister had done. My parents always bought two, because they had two girls 1 year apart. The fact that we were total opposites made no difference to them. They thought shopping was the easiest thing in the world because they just found some girl stuff and they bought two of them. One's blue, one's red, same thing, right? And this was pretty much the same all through, I don't know, I guess when we hit teenage years they might have noticed that we were different personalities and started getting us different stuff. But in the childhood years, whatever she got, I knew I got the same. And I liked waiting until Christmas morning, because I enjoyed Christmas. So I was okay with not knowing what that was. And since she was not, she would go along and she would, typical kid trick, right? Unwrap the presents and wrap them back up before Christmas. So that way she would know what they were. Except when she unwrapped the presents, she then felt the need to come and tell me all about what was in them. And I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to have my surprise, right? I was quite annoyed by the whole thing. She'd say, oh, guess what I got? I got this and this and this and this. And that, of course, as soon as she says that, spoiler alert, I know what I'm getting. So, to make a long story short, I have a child just like that. And I realized one year that she had snuck into her gifts and unwrapped them all. Now, I didn't do exactly like my parents did, because I knew my children had different personalities. So they would each get pieces of clothing, but it would match their style, or they would each get a doll, depending on what they were interested in. They didn't have carbon copies of each other's gifts, but I didn't think it was fair that she was knowing what she got for Christmas and telling the others what she got, because there was a good chance that they got something along that lines, or at least around that value, and I didn't want them to know ahead of time. So I had to get tricky. So eventually what I did, and of course as a parent you also have to be tricky enough to buy separate wrapping paper that's just from Santa. The unfortunate thing, of course, was that during this time I bought a Costco roll of wrapping paper. And when you're doing presents that are just from Santa, it takes you 20 years to use it. So every year why does Santa always have the same wrapping paper? I don't know. You know. Anyways, I realized that my daughter was unwrapping and rewrapping. And so I got sneaky about the whole thing. And I would wrap all the presents, but I wouldn't put any labels on them, because I didn't want her to know which ones were hers. She wouldn't go to the effort of unwrapping everybody's presents. She just wanted to know what her presents were. And if she didn't know which ones were her presents, kind of spoiled the whole plan. So that's what I used to do. So what I eventually would do is I would leave myself little notes. All the presents for this child were wrapped in this paper with this color ribbon. And all the ones for this child were in this paper with this color ribbon. And that's how I ended up going back into dressing the presents up with the ribbons. It was my way of remembering which one was for which kid. So that my sneaky one couldn't get in there and figure out what she was getting for Christmas beforehand. So I started out telling you this little side story here because last year my youngest child, who happens to be the most like me, was here making some handmade Christmas gifts with me for people, because being a teenager she's on a budget, and so she was hand making some gifts. And when she started wrapping, actually this was 2 years ago, when she started wrapping the gifts, she was swiftly corrected by the older sister about how to wrap presents in the proper manner with hospital corners and matching bows and all the right jazz. And I thought it's quite funny that at least one of the children has picked up my anal present wrapping hang-ups, I guess you'd call them. Picked up my my OCD. I don't really have a lot of OCD issues, but Christmas wrapping is one. And apparently I trained her right, though. She knew what she was doing. She wrapped some very beautiful presents. Somewhere along the way she learned something. I thought that was quite funny. Anyway, so while I've been talking, obviously I've been wrapping. Putting a finishing touch on the corners, because I don't want them to catch on the box. I want to make sure they're stuck down fairly well. And the outside corners as well. So I had one corner that didn't quite line up perfectly, but I'm not going to be too upset about it. So I now have a nicely wrapped lid. The corners are fairly tidy. And a nicely wrapped box with my lovely brooch in it. Hopefully, it's a little snug sometimes because obviously you've added an extra couple of layers by doing all this extra wrapping. So there we go. I can hear that it's not sliding around in there, so it's staying in the felt where I wanted it to. And like I say, I had the teal colored kind of ribbon picked out to go with it, but it doesn't really line up with the colors very well. Kind of, not really. I think the white will stand out. I have kind of a general rule of thumb when it comes to putting bows and decorations on presents. And this is what it is. I mean, you don't have to listen to me, but this is kind of what I've come across over the years. If you use a plain paper, one year I can't remember particularly why, but for whatever reason I decided I was going to make my own wrapping paper. And so everybody got paper that was stamped. Stamped or pictures drawn on it with markers or whatever. I don't know what they thought of this. But anyways, that's what I did. And at that time I realized if you use a plain paper, you can fancy it up with the bows and the fancy handmade tags and all that kind of fun stuff. Because it doesn't like clash. There's not too much going on. So you can even tie it with twine and then glue some sprigs of holly or something like that, or some lace or whatever. If it's a plain base package, you can do a lot of fancy stuff on it. If you do a fancier looking pattern or a bright colorful pattern, a nice plain ribbon I think works best because it's a nice contrast. So for those of you who aren't total fanatics about your wrapping, you don't put your ribbon under it like a lot of people do, because then you'll end up, when you go to tie it, on the bottom. You start at the top. And you start at the top and you just kind of lay it flat in the center. Take it to the bottom. And you cross it over like so. And that means it's going to lay flat underneath. Right? So there you've got your flat. Then you lay it back down on top of your crisscross so that it stays flat, and you pull it back up. Now if you've done this right and you've left enough space, you have some room to tie it. I personally would like that to be longer because I want a nice bow. So I'm going to, which end did that? Slide it farther along. Do it again. So I'm going to crisscross, like so. Lay it down flat on top of my crisscross, and bring it back. Sometimes, if I'm being extra picky, I will tape that down right there. I may do it when I'm done. But right now, I'm basically going to pull these up, and I'm going to cut them the same length, like so I can get rid of this thing. And then I do my first tie, like so, and then this one end I slide it underneath the other, the base piece. I slide it underneath here, and I do that just so that when I make the next tie, it's in the center and it doesn't slide around. There we go. So if this was a curly ribbon, I could curl it or do whatever with it. It's not, so I'm just going to make a bow. And the easiest way to make a bow, I find, for gifts is to make the two loops and then cross them over like you would when you're tying your shoes. and then you can kind of play around with it to get your loops nice. So here's my finished present. And I think those boxes are great. I have 5 more of them. I might not use them all for these because obviously if it's a small item, there's a lot of space in that box for nothing. The ones that are going on the toques will be perfect because that toque can lay right down in there. But this was my thing that was rattling around in my head all day today, and I just wanted to share with you that you can repurpose some of these really nice boxes. If you find a really nice box, I think it's worth it to save it and repurpose it because you never know when you're going to find a good use for it. So that's my thought for the day. Again, sorry about the rambling, but I've made this in 25 minutes, maybe half an hour, which is kind of an improvement. I still talk too much, I think. But again, some of my crafty stuff won't be on YouTube right now until I get my camera issues sorted a little better. So if you'd like to come and see some blog posts that also have to be about crafting, I mean, there's also posts for cooking, and there's posts for money saving tips and Christmas shopping tips and that kind of thing. They're all on survivinglifeover40.com, and I will be there. Again, my name is Joy, and the blog name is Adventures in Menopause. It's not all about menopause, don't panic. So come join me. In the meantime, take care, happy Christmas shopping and Christmas wrapping.